What happens when the sport's most decorated driver swaps silver for scarlet, only to discover the famous red paint is peeling from the inside? Lewis Hamilton entered Ferrari believing he could author a renaissance, a sequel more dramatic than anything Maranello had scripted since the golden era of Michael Schumacher. Pre-season simulations whispered that the SF25 could tame Red Bull's aerodynamic wizardry, and social feeds buzzed with renders of Hamilton in crimson overalls. Then came the Miami Grand Prix, where a single, quietly furious radio call, "This is not good teamwork," sent shockwaves through the paddock. Hamilton's tipping point unfolded as car 44, armed with fresh medium tyres and searing pace, reeled in Charles Leclerc's hard-shod twin under the Miami floodlights. The delta on his steering wheel showed a gain of almost 1 second each lap. All the Briton requested was permission to pass before his rubber glazed. Ferrari's reply? 3 agonising laps of silence, followed by an instruction to stay within drag reduction range. To a driver scenting 7th place and perhaps more, that sounded like a parachute thrown from the pit wall. When the silence finally broke, Hamilton's verdict, delivered in 12 measured words, ignited headlines from Melbourne to Monza. Meanwhile, at the sharp end, McLaren's Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris converted 2nd and 4th on the grid into a 1-2 masterclass, while pole-sitter Max Verstappen slid backwards in a Red Bull grappling with tyre graining. Even raw speed could not hide the truth. For Ferrari, hesitation is now the slowest corner on every track. Formula One bargains in milliseconds. Ferrari wasted roughly 180. During those lost seconds, Hamilton's peak grip mediums cooled. Turbulent air baked the outer shoulders, and Andrea Kimi Antonelli's Mercedes stretched the gap ahead by more than 2 seconds. Hamilton had engineered that opportunity himself, diving into the pit lane during an early virtual safety car triggered by Jack Doohan's stranded Alpine. Data was unambiguous. Release him now, and he could aim for 5th. Hold him back, and even 7th would be a scrap. Ferrari chose the latter. Leclerc's cockpit, by contrast, remained a meditation chamber. No debates, no anxious updates, only steady lap times and the assurance that, should positions flip, his crew possessed the authority to reverse them at will. Performance analysts later calculated that Hamilton's tyres lost 30% of their intended life expectancy while trapped in that heat plume. At last, Hamilton swept by at turn 17, but 14 kilometres later, the pit wall told him to hand the place straight back. There was no tyre cliff, no cunning undercut, just a curt instruction without logic. Over the radio, he asked, half sarcastic and half disbelieving, whether he should wave through every car behind as well. Seasoned observers, long inured to Scuderia curveballs, labelled the call mind-boggling. That single reversal did more than cost track position. It broadcast a hierarchy many suspected, but none in Maranello would admit. When a team's first instinct is to cushion one driver at the expense of another, trust inside the garage shatters, and once broken, even flawless strategy cannot glue it back together. Enter Carlos Sainz. Now racing in Williams blue after a winter seat shuffle, the Spaniard carried nothing to lose and everything to prove. On the final lap, he dived down Hamilton's inside at turn 17, the pair banging wheels and showering sparks across the asphalt. Stewards called Sainz to explain both the collision and an earlier failure to respect yellow flags, ultimately issuing no penalty. For Hamilton, it was insult atop injury. After sacrificing strategy, suffering tyre degradation in dirty air, and obeying baffling orders, he now had to defend 8th place from a man he once mentored. The radio stayed silent. The message was deafening. Ferrari's concept of solidarity appeared limited to the other side of the garage. Grand Prix calamities germinate on Saturday. Hamilton qualified 12th after wrestling an SF25 that morphs from stubborn understeer to snap oversteer between corners. He likened the experience to riding a rodeo without the rope. Engineers later confirmed that once the car runs low fuel through slow bends, the rear suspension enters a non-linear zone, sapping grip and forcing ride heights 4 mm higher than simulations prefer. Leclerc faces identical hardware demons, yet his side of the garage muffles them better via subtle brake migration tweaks, incremental wing angles, and perhaps a temperament that breeds patience. The outcome is brutal arithmetic. Start ahead, control strategy, finish ahead. Across 6 rounds that Edge has awarded the Monegasque 16 precious points. Hardware, however, is only half the crisis. The human interface is fraying just as badly. A race engineer must be translator, tactician, risk analyst, and therapist. Right now, Hamilton hears a dialect he cannot trust. His partnership with Riccardo Adami, hastily forged after departing Mercedes, feels reactive rather than proactive. Overnight setup swings oscillate like a pendulum. Radio replies often arrive a corner too late, and in both Shanghai and Miami, Hamilton yielded when told, only to find the courtesy unreturned when fortunes flipped. Leclerc and engineer Brian Bozzi, by contrast, converse in clipped, confident code. In Formula One, conviction equals speed. Hesitation becomes drag. Engineers do not merely adjust wing flaps, they transmit belief. Without belief, a driver lifts the throttle fractionally, questions tyre life, and each micropause amplifies over 57 laps into wasted potential. Miami provided the textbook case. Hamilton on mediums, Leclerc on hards, yet one Ferrari flying and the other fuming. 6 Grands Prix into the calendar, Ferrari languishes fourth in the constructors' standings, trailing McLaren, Mercedes and Red Bull. Every lost place in Miami represented another hemorrhage from a title bid that once fired tifosi dreams. Hamilton sits 7th in the drivers' table, 16 markers behind Leclerc, and almost a full victory shy of championship leader Piastri. Analysts calculate that Ferrari's hesitation bottled Hamilton behind Leclerc for 11.9 seconds, the margin between attacking George Russell for 5th and limping home 8th. Project that over 24 rounds and strategy dithering alone could cost more points than a blown power unit. Formula One is merciless. The seconds one team forfeits become the trophies another raises. Right now, McLaren is hoisting silverware with both hands, and Verstappen is salvaging podiums despite a car that looks suddenly mortal. Ferrari, by contrast, seems determined to defeat itself first and the competition second. So where does the Scuderia go from here? Lewis Hamilton crossed Ferrari's threshold to chase an 8th world crown and elevate Italy's proudest team from drought to dawn. Yet as spring tilts toward a scorching European summer, the supposed Renaissance looks more like a masterpiece, painted with trembling hands, visionary in stroke, erratic in detail, droplets of brilliance flicked across a canvas, cracking at the edges. Miami proved that raw horsepower cannot outrun hesitation, and that 2 drivers in identical machinery can inhabit entirely different universes when trust fractures down the middle of the garage. Tactically, the remedies are obvious even to armchair strategists. Streamline the pit wall hierarchy, empower a single strategist instead of 3 competing voices, and pair Hamilton with an engineer whose instincts match his high-tempo philosophy. Yet culture congeals slower than brake discs cool, and Ferrari's toughest rival may be inertia buried deep inside spreadsheets, old habits, and meeting rooms where urgency suffocates beneath tradition. Unless those rooms echo with decisive leadership soon, the SF25's potential will stay trapped in wind tunnel renderings and post-race excuses. Meanwhile, every Grand Prix that slips away amplifies the stakes. For Hamilton, the clock ticks relentlessly toward a record-shattering 8th title that once felt inevitable. For Ferrari, another season of squandered promise risks turning tifosi adoration into outright revolt. Sponsors calculate value per television minute, young talents like Ollie Behrman lurk in the wings, and rival teams grow stronger with each confused radio message released into the public domain. The margin for error is shrinking faster than a set of overheated softs on a humid street circuit. That leaves fans with a question only the team can answer. Is this chaos a curable misfire, or the symptom of deeper rot? Hamilton's legacy, Ferrari's gamble, and perhaps the credibility of the entire 2025 championship hang in the balance. One certainty endures. The paddock is listening, microphones live, waiting for the next crackle of static that will reveal whether the Scuderia has finally learned to speak with one voice, or whether history is poised to repeat at maximum volume, drowning out even the roar of an Italian V6 on full song.